Right, lace up those virtual hiking boots, everybody. Today, we're going on a deep dive into Cooke State Park in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And wow, you guys sent in a ton of great stuff, articles, park websites, even some visitor blogs and a YouTube video.
It's a pretty amazing park. You know, what really gets me about Cooke is this kind of this incredible mix of raw, almost primal beauty with this really interesting human history, like woven right into the landscape.
Yeah, I love that. Primal beauty, that's a great way to put it. I mean, just looking at some of these photos, we're talking dramatic gorges carved by the St. Louis River. And that's the biggest tributary flowing into Lake Superior, right?
That is, yeah.
Have you ever actually been there?
Yeah, I have. And just standing on the edge of that gorge, you know, looking down at the river, rushing through those ancient rock formations, it's really something else. It makes you realize, like, the power of nature, you know, shaping the land over millions of years.
Wow. Okay, so we've got the St. Louis River as our main character here, literally carving its way through the park. What can you tell us about these rock formations? The articles mentioned some pretty intense geological processes.
Well, so imagine this. Hundreds of millions of years ago, this whole area was underwater, like submerged under a vast ocean. The sediments on that ancient seafloor over eons were compressed and transformed into the bedrock we see today, like slate, gray whack, really tough, resistant rocks.
So that explains, like, the steep cliffs and the rugged terrain. It's like we're looking back in time.
Exactly. And then, just to add even more drama, there were volcanic eruptions around 1.1 billion years ago. Molten rock, you know, forcing its way up through cracks in the Earth's crust, creating those dark bands of basalt you see. They kind of cut through the lighter colored slate.
Wow, talk about a dramatic backstory. Like, it's like something out of a geology textbook, but brought to life. And the YouTube video you sent really captures those visuals, the way the light plays on the rocks, the contrast between that dark basalt and the almost silvery sheen of the slate.
And then on top of all that, you have the glaciers. You know, they scoured and sculpted the landscape during the last ice age. They left behind those rounded rock formations. They're called roches moutonnées, and they're scattered throughout the park, almost like giant smooth pebbles left behind by a receding tide.
Okay, so we've got layers upon layers of geological history here,
Right.
all contributing to this rugged primeval landscape. No wonder photographers love this place.
And it's not just about the rocks either. The St. Louis River itself adds a lot to the beauty. It's not a wide, lazy river. It's powerful, full of rapids and waterfalls, you know, carving its way through that gorge with this incredible energy.
Yeah, the visitor blogs really emphasize that energy. One person described it as, like, the river was alive, a force of nature that commands respect. And then there's that iconic swinging bridge.
Oh yeah, the swinging bridge. Can't talk about Cooke without mentioning that. Yeah. It's like a symbol of the park, you know, this delicate structure suspended above this powerful, untamed river.
I read that it's been rebuilt twice because of flood damage. That's got to be quite a story.
It is. The original bridge was built back in the 1930s by the Civilian Conservation Corps. One of those New Deal programs, you know, put a lot of Americans to work during the Depression. They did incredible work building trails, bridges, and structures in parks across the country.
So the swinging bridge is not just a cool landmark. It's also a testament to, like, a specific time in American history. You know, a time when people came together to build something that would connect them to nature.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, it's been rebuilt twice. Most recently, after a major flood in 2012, they actually had to, like, raise the bridge by several feet to protect it from future floods. It shows you that, you know, even in a place that seems as timeless as Cooke, nature is always working, reshaping the landscape and challenging us.
Really makes you realize the importance of resilience.
Yeah.
Both in terms of the park and in our own approach to interacting with nature.
Right. We have to be able to adapt. Speaking of adapting, you mentioned visitor blogs, and one thing that I noticed is how many people talked about the trails. It seems like there's something for everyone, from leisurely walks along the river to some pretty challenging climbs.
Okay, let's talk trails.
Yeah.
I'm seeing over 50 miles of hiking trails, some even connecting to those larger trails that run through the whole region.
Yeah. The Superior Hiking Trail and the North Country National Scenic Trail both intersect with the park's trails. So, you know, if you wanted to, you could hike for hundreds of miles using Cooke as like a starting point or a stopover.
Wow, so it's like a gateway to this whole network of trails. But even if you're not a hardcore hiker, there are, like, easier options, right?
Absolutely. There are trails that wind along the riverbank offering beautiful views and the sound of the water. There are trails that climb up to scenic overlooks, giving you, panoramic vistas of the whole park. And then there are trails that just meander through the forest, so you can really experience the quiet of the woods.
I'm seeing the CCC trail mentioned a lot. It sounds like a good one, hitting a lot of the highlights.
Yeah, the CCC trail is great for families and those looking for a more leisurely hike. It follows the river for a good portion, so you get those great views, and it passes by some of the park's historical features, like the foundations of an old logging camp. It's a really nice way to see both the natural and human history of Jay Cooke.
What about those challenging climbs you mentioned? For people who want a bit of a workout, what trails would you recommend?
Well, if you want a challenge and some really incredible views, the Carlton Trail Trip is a must-do. It's a loop trail that takes you up to the highest points in the park, offering these amazing panoramic views of the St. Louis River Valley. It's not for the faint of heart, but the payoff is definitely worth it.
I'm seeing some pictures of the views from that trail, and wow, those are incredible. You can see for miles.
Exactly. And along the way, you experience all those different facets of Jay Cooke landscape. The cliffs, the forests, the river. It's really immersive.
So we've got the river, the rocks, the trails, and this fascinating history. It's obvious why Jay Cooke is considered one of Minnesota's best parks. But what about the man himself? Who was Jay Cooke, and how did this park get named after him?
That's a great question. Takes us back to the 19th century. Jay Cooke was this prominent financier and railroad tycoon. He saw the potential of the St. Louis River, not just for its scenic beauty, but also for its power. He thought about using the river to generate electricity, to fuel industry.
So he was kind of a visionary.
Yeah.
Seeing beyond the landscape to the possibilities.
He was. And while his big plans for industrial development didn't really materialize, his legacy lives on in the park. He understood how important it was to protect this place, and because of his work, we get to enjoy it today.
It's interesting how a place that's so wild is also connected to, finance and industry. It says something about the relationship between, humans and nature, how we've both shaped and been shaped by the land.
And that's a theme that runs throughout Jay Cooke's history. It's a place where you can see how we interacted with the landscape, from the Native American tribes who first lived here, to the loggers who harvested timber, to the CCC workers who built those trails.
And today it's a place where people come to reconnect with nature, to hike, bike, camp, to just enjoy the peace and quiet.
It's a testament to how nature can inspire and rejuvenate us. Even in a world where, technology and city life are so dominant, places like Jay Cooke remind us of that deep connection we have to the natural world.
We've covered a lot in this first part of our dive into Jay Cooke State Park, but it feels like we're just getting started. What are some of the things you'd like to explore more?
Well, I'm really interested in that 2012 flood. It must have been devastating, but it also seems like it was a chance to change, to rethink how we manage this fragile landscape. And I'd love to know more about the people who've called this area home, the indigenous communities, the early settlers, the people who worked to protect this place.
Yeah, those are some great points. I'm ready to dive into those. But for now, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to continue our deep dive into Jay Cooke State Park. Welcome back to our deep dive into Jay Cooke State Park. Before the break, we were talking about the 2012 flood and how it impacted the park.
Yeah, it was a huge event. What's interesting is that the park has seen floods throughout its history. The St. Louis River is powerful, and it tends to change a lot, especially in the spring when the snow melts or after heavy rains.
Yeah, I'm looking at some pictures from that 2012 flood, and the damage is it's unbelievable. The swinging bridge got ripped away, trails were washed out, whole sections of the park were underwater.
It really shows you the power of nature and the kind of the challenges we have trying to live with these forces. But it's also a story of coming back.
Yeah, because the park didn't just, give up. They rebuilt, they came back stronger. Like the swing bridge, they reconstructed it, and they even raised it higher so it could handle future floods.
Exactly. And it's not just the buildings and stuff. The whole ecosystem is really resilient. The forests, the river, the wildlife, they've all kind of adapted to these floods over a really long time. Floods actually, they play a big part in shaping the park's ecology.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, so when there's a flood, it helps clear out debris, and it creates new habitats for animals and plants, and it deposits nutrients that make the soil richer, and it helps keep the river flowing naturally, which is, super important for the whole ecosystem.
So it's not about stopping floods completely, but more about understanding them, as part of nature's cycle, and then adapting our stuff and our activities to fit in.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, between using the park and preserving it, realizing that we're a part of this big ecosystem and it has its own rhythms. And that kind of reminds me of something we talked about earlier, about Jay Cooke himself.
Oh, you mean the financier and railroad guy?
Yeah, he had this big vision for using the river's power for industry and economic growth. He even built a dam on the river. It got replaced by the Thompson Dam later, but that's still running today.
So his legacy isn't just about protecting the park's beauty, but also about using its resources in a smart way.
Right, and that's a tough question, isn't it? How do we balance needing energy and development with protecting our natural resources? It's something we're still figuring out, not just at Jay Cooke, but, everywhere.
It's a good reminder that even in a place like Jay Cooke that seems so wild and remote, we're still dealing with these big questions about us and the environment.
Definitely. And speaking of our connection to the environment, one thing that stood out in those visitor blogs is how much people talk about, the peace and quiet they feel in the park. It's like an escape from all the noise of everyday life.
Yeah, that seems to be a theme in a lot of the stuff we're looking at. People talk about feeling refreshed, inspired, even changed by their time in nature.
Yeah, it's like being surrounded by these old forests and these powerful rivers, these landscapes. It connects with something deep inside us. It reminds us of where we fit in the big picture.
It's a powerful reminder, especially in a world that can feel so disconnected. But it's not just about sitting and thinking, is it? There's also a sense of adventure, of exploring, of pushing your limits.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that's so cool about Jay Cooke is all the different things you can do there. We've already talked about hiking, but there's so much more. Mountain biking, rock climbing, kayaking, fishing, you name it, Jay Cooke's got it.
Yeah, I'm looking at a map of the mountain biking trails, and they look pretty intense. Steep climbs, winding down hills, technical sections.
And those trails go through some of the most beautiful parts of the park, so you're not just, getting exercise, you're getting, this amazing view. And if you want something a little more relaxed, there are gravel roads and easier trails that are great for a casual ride.
And then there's the river itself.
Yeah.
You could kayak or canoe. Imagine paddling down the St. Louis River, the current taking you along, surrounded by those cliffs and forests.
Yeah, that would be amazing. You're not just looking at the landscape, you're in it,
Yeah.
You're feeling how powerful the river is. And for people who'd rather stay on dry land, there's always fishing.
Right. The St. Louis River is known for its walleye, northern pike, and trout, so it's a popular spot. And if you don't even want to get near the water, there's always picnicking, bird watching, wildlife viewing, or just chilling by the river and taking it all in.
And don't forget about camping. Jay Cooke has a bunch of different campsites, from tent sites to RV hookups, so there's something for everyone.
I see they even have camper cabins that are open all year round. That'd be fun in the winter when it's all snowy and the river's frozen.
Totally. And winter brings its own activities, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, ice fishing. Jay Cooke is a year-round place with something for everyone.
It's clear that this park is way more than just pretty views. It's got history, recreation, inspiration, It's about connecting with nature and with ourselves. And it seems like there's always something new to discover, no matter how many times you visit.
I think that's part of what makes Jay Cooke so special. It keeps showing you new things. Every time you go, you see something different. You learn something new.
We've covered a lot in this part of our deep dive. From that flood in 2012 to how resilient the park is, from Jay Cooke's vision to all the incredible things you can do there.
And there's still more to explore. The stories of the indigenous people who lived here first, the details of the park's geology, all the amazing ways the plants and animals have adapted to this place.
We'll get into all those details in the last part of our deep dive into Jay Cooke State Park. Stick around. All right, we're back for the final part of our Jay Cooke State Park deep dive. Ready to uncover those hidden gems and cool facts you mentioned.
Definitely. One thing that keeps popping up is the park's geology. We touched on it, but, it's worth digging a little deeper.
Okay, let's get our geology hats on. You were saying, the story of Jay Cooke's rocks goes back billions of years, right?
Yeah, billions. Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing. Imagine the oldest rocks in the park, the Thompson Formation. They started as sediment at the bottom of this huge inland sea. Over time, that sediment was compressed and heated, and it turned into those layers of slate and graywacke we see now.
So those cliffs those big cliffs we see by the river, they were once just like mud at the bottom of an ocean. That's amazing.
It's pretty incredible, right? And it gets even more dramatic. About 1.1 billion years ago, the Earth's crust in this area, it started to pull apart. It's called the Mid-Continent Rift. And it caused these huge volcanic eruptions. Molten rock, came up through cracks in the earth and created those dark bands of basalt. They cut right through the lighter slate.
Wow, it's like a layer cake of geology. Each layer telling a different story about the Earth. I remember those photos of the basalt near the swinging bridge. They're almost black, a real contrast to the other rocks.
Exactly. And these different rock types, they don't just make the park look cool, they also affect what kinds of plants and animals live there. Like some wildflowers can only grow in the soil you find on those slate outcrops.
So it's all connected, right? Geology, soil, plants, animals. All like shaping each other over time. The park website's mentioned a few spots where you can actually see the different formations up close. Any of you recommend?
Oh yeah, for sure. To see those tilted layers of slate, the river trail has some great views. And for the basalt formations, head to the swinging bridge area. You can actually see those volcanic dikes where the molten rock pushed through the slate. Like a window into the Earth's past.
Okay, that's going on my list. Talking about all these layers of history, it makes me think about the indigenous communities who lived in this region, way before Jay Cooke himself.
Yeah, that's such an important part of the park's story, and it doesn't get talked about enough. The Ojibwe people, they called this area home for centuries. They traveled the St. Louis River, they fished, they hunted, and they really understood the land.
One article mentioned the St. Louis River was like a main route for the Ojibwe, connecting them to other communities, for trade and stuff.
Right, and you can still see evidence of them in the park. Old campsites, rock carvings, even remnants of gardens. It reminds us that people have been here for a long time, much longer than, since European settlers arrived.
It's important to remember that, to acknowledge that history.
Yeah.
That the landscape we see today is the result of centuries of people living here and taking care of the land.
Absolutely. And that brings us back to conservation. How do we make sure that Jay Cooke stays this amazing place for future generations?
That's a big question. I think it starts with the things we've been talking about: staying on the trails, respecting the wildlife, packing out our trash, being, mindful visitors.
And it also means supporting, the park's conservation work. Volunteering, donating to organizations that protect nature, supporting policies that put the environment first. All of that helps.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we're not just visiting Jay Cooke. We're part of this community that's responsible for keeping it healthy. We all have a role to play in making sure this place is still here for our kids and grandkids to enjoy.
Couldn't agree more. As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm really struck by how diverse Jay Cooke State Park is. From its ancient rocks to people who've lived here, from those rugged cliffs to those peaceful forests. It really does have something for everyone.
And it's a place that keeps drawing you back, whether you're a hiker or a history buff or just someone who loves being in nature. Jay Cooke has something to offer.
It's a real Minnesota treasure, and it shows how powerful nature can be, how it can, inspire us and recharge us.
Well said. So to our listeners, if you're ever in northeastern Minnesota, make sure to visit Jay Cooke State Park. You won't be disappointed.
And when you're exploring the trails or paddling the river or just, sitting by a waterfall, take a minute to appreciate everything around you, the history of the land, the forces that shaped it, the stories of the people who've called it home.
It's a good reminder that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. Yeah. And that what we do today, it matters for the future.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Jay Cooke State Park. We hope you've enjoyed it.
And until next time, happy exploring, everyone.